All right, here we are. Welcome to our first episode of Checking In with OCG. In this series, I will be hosting OCG staff members to chat about the latest and greatest happenings going on within the world of sponsored project administration. So here with us today is Senior Proposal Analyst and Proposal Budgeting Extraordinaire, Allison. Hi, Allie.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
Great. Thanks for being my guinea pig on this. Really appreciate it. So just to give you guys an idea of the format, for the first 20 minutes, I'll be asking Allie some questions I've prepared. And then for the last 10 minutes, I'll open it up to questions from y'all, the audience. So if questions do come up during the interview, hold on to them. We've carved out time just for you. All right. So I think it's time to get started. Allie, hey, excited to dive in. So we're already over a month into CU's 2021 fiscal year. That's crazy. The fiscal year for the university begins July 1st, and that usually comes with like an overhaul of updates and proposal budgeting procedures. So could you maybe tell us about proposal budgeting updates this year? What's going on in the proposal world?
Absolutely, I would be happy to. The first thing I want to address with that is our new inflation and fringe benefit rates. So usually around this time every year is when we just get overhauled with new numbers and equations that we have to consider. So for the first time in my almost 6.5-year-long career here, we have shifted from a 3% inflation factor for salaries and wages to a 2.25% inflation factor for salaries and wages. So that is a pretty big change for people and when they're doing their calculations. And a huge part of that is obviously due to COVID and the anticipations in furloughs and just budget cuts across the board. So that is where that number is coming from. We are not accounting for inflation on salaries or tuition for fiscal year 2021. So that is going to be a project period of July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. So in that case, that is what we're doing. We're not applying that 2.25% inflation factor for salaries or for tuition to account for the fact that we aren't seeing those increase this fiscal year. I want to remind everyone that our inflation memo, so where those numbers are coming from, it does come from the Office of Budget and Fiscal Planning here at CU Boulder. So we have a specific document that calls it all out. It was released on May 29th of 2020. And we do use this document as backup documentation whenever we have questions from sponsors. So sometimes sponsors might push back on inflation or why we're doing it. And that's kind of our first step in documenting why we're doing what we're doing. And then I also do want to call out that we did receive a new negotiated rate agreement with the Department of Health and Human Services. So that new date is June 24th, 2020. And that included all of our new fringe benefit rates. So you will have seen that there was a slight increase that did go into effect with our fringe benefit rates that is captured in that document. And that document only discussed fringe. We are currently still waiting on a new FNA rate. So eventually, we've been told that that's delayed. We don't really know how much of a delay. We typically get that document in July. Obviously, we're in August now, so it's delayed. But we will receive yet another agreement with a new date and a new FNA rate. So we're kind of just sitting tight until we see that documentation come through. Obviously, once that does hit, you guys will see yet a new round of our cost estimation tool template and budget justification template. So thank you for bearing with us. A lot of versions have been rolled out recently, and that's just for us to try to stay up to date with those inflation factors, fringe benefit rates, eventually updated FNA rate, but there's just a lot going on. So we're trying to do our best to capture it, and it took a while for us all to get on the same page of how we were going to budget considering COVID-19.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. So I'm assuming all those updates are showing up on the OCG website in their usual places in terms of the new fringe agreements, so on and so forth, correct? Or
Correct.
should we expect an email?
Yeah, I don't know emails. I would more so, it's just updated as fast as we can on our website. And we have appreciated, a few of you have reached out to us to let us know we don't have the right agreement date listed or something's funky. So anytime you see a number you wouldn't expect to, we really appreciate you letting us know. We're human, sometimes we finger fudge or just miss something. So, but all those documents should be updated on our forms page. Basically, we move as fast as we can on those because we know how important it is to budget correctly.
Right, great, awesome. So, I mean, this goes without saying, but COVID has single-handedly changed just about everything over the last 4 months. So how has COVID affected proposal preparation and or submission?
Great question. So for the most part, we have seen some extended deadlines for some sponsors and funding opportunity announcements. We've seen this handled in a variety of ways. So some sponsors are putting out a letter that kind of covers all open solicitations, and they've pushed a standard deadline they set it for a standard due date, let's say, while other sponsors are updating specific funding opportunity announcements as they see fit. So OCG, we are paying attention to all of the emails that we're getting from sponsors and really trying to sift through those documents. We have specific sponsor experts that are keeping us up to date, but we also recommend really sifting through that FOA, the funding opportunity announcement, and making sure that if there is a deadline extension that you see that. So again, it's kind of hard because each sponsor is doing it differently. So I don't have a concrete answer, but we have been seeing a lot of extensions just due to COVID and the fact that we're all remote, and a lot of sponsors understand that our professors are under a ton of stress right now. Another thing I want to call out that's different with COVID is in InfoEd, we have added a checkbox for COVID-related research. This was a way for our office and others to really be able to search for just as many proposals that we're submitting to COVID-related opportunities, just so we could track those and see just what we're doing as a university. So proposal analysts are checking this box for any proposal that is COVID-related. So whether that's scientific research for COVID, support for economic hardship due to COVID, et cetera. So we do have that checkbox available, and it's on the summary tab of the proposal tracking page in InfoEd. Another thing that COVID is making funky is furloughs. So we want to be very clear that we are not budgeting salaries at our furlough rates. There's no situation where we will. So on a few occasions, we have been asked to budget salary at the 5% reduced rate per CU Boulder's current furlough situation. Our policy is to budget at the full rate as it is listed in HCM, as the furlough is temporary, and keeping in mind that that 2.25% inflation factor is already taking that into account. That's lower than our standard 3% rate. And I know there's some issues. HCM, I know departments, you guys probably know more about this than I do, but I know we're starting to see HCM entries with that temporary reduced rate. Again, I want to call out, make sure you're not using that rate. We need to use the 1 FTE rate, so they're full-time. And we have a salary roster that proposal analysts can look at to double check. And I know HCM really should have 2 entries, 1 for full-time, 1 for temporary reduced. Some PIs only have temporary reduced listed, so that's a little weird, but we're hoping just as people update their record keeping that will sift itself out. But obviously let us know if you have questions. Another item I want to touch related to COVID is the effects on inflation. So we already talked about inflation for salaries and wages and tuition, but as some of you likely noticed, we are now inflating fringe benefit rates at 2%. So for some of you, this will be a repeat and something that you're familiar with. For others, this will be something that's new. So we used to do this in the past. We stopped doing it. Now we're doing it again. Again, because of COVID, and we're expecting fringe benefits to increase for the university over time. Our cost estimation tool is smart enough to take care of this for you. All you need to do is tell the tool if your start date is before 7/1/2020 or not. You'll see there's a question for that start date, and it's a drop box and you can select yes or no. If you select yes, the template will inflate fringe in year 1. If you select no, it will not inflate. So our template will take care of that 2% inflation each year for you, but that's just something else to keep in mind. We've also added language to our budget justification to call out that we're inflating fringe. Some of our sponsors, particularly NASA, does not like to see this. So we're hoping that calling that out in our budget justification can help sponsors to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And the last thing I want to touch on is the NSF approved formats for biographical sketches in current and pending. This was, the rollout of this was supposed to happen June 1st. This was delayed because of COVID. And so we're expecting it to go into effect as of October 5th. We'll see what happens, but see our website or contact your proposal analyst for more details. If this is the first time you're hearing this, we really hope it's not. OCG recommendation is to start using these formats now. And that is all I have related to COVID and what it's doing to proposals.
Wow. Thank goodness for proposal analysts, because that's a lot to keep track of. So thank you for doing that all behind the scenes for all of us. It's always good to be aware of, but just know that your folks over at OCG, they're on it. So Allie, thank you for taking care of all that stuff, because that was a lot. So speaking of new proposal requirements, are you seeing any other changes in what sponsors are requiring for proposals? What's new?
Yes. And this isn't necessarily specific to COVID. It's just other things that we're seeing happening in the world because life is still going on. So we do want to point out that recently we've noticed DOE, the Department of Energy, funding opportunity announcements are starting to include some weird language regarding indemnification in some of their announcements. Just as a standard thing, CU Boulder cannot accept indemnity. Therefore, we need to do something about that. So how DOE is writing it in their funding opportunity announcements is basically, here it is, if you submit, you're agreeing to it, which again, we cannot do. So we have obtained standard language to include in proposals going to DOE. It was provided by our contracts team here at OCG saying that we can't accept indemnity, and we've recommended putting this in the project management plan. We are kind of still in the process of figuring this out. This might only be relevant for contracts now instead of grants. So work with your specific PA as far as what language needs to be included, but it's just something to keep in mind. It's really DOE's being a little sneaky, and it's just a couple links later, you realize you're accepting indemnity, essentially. So that's something to look out for. And then another sponsor we wanted to call out is NASA. We want you guys to be on the lookout for programs that are dual anonymous review. These proposals have to be formatted in a very particular way, and your assigned proposal analyst can provide specific guidance. We just wanted to call that out for you because it's, again, just something funky that we're not used to seeing.
Cool, thanks for those updates. So I know OCG has also implemented some changes in the proposal forms recently. So what are some of those changes that we should look out for?
Yeah, absolutely. As hopefully all of you know, we did update our PSR form. It was released July 20th, so just a few weeks ago. Really, it should look very similar. We changed a little bit of the formatting to make it more user-friendly. And we also added a couple of assurances. So we added something called the NIH assurance and then the China assurance. These assurance documents we used to collect just separately, but we added them to the PSR form to just make life easier and reduce administrative burden. But if your proposal is not related to either of those things, you don't have to answer those questions. So NIH assurance, that is only being used when you have an NIH fellowship or F-series proposal. Otherwise, we don't need an NIH assurance. So it's just covering those. And then the China assurance is anytime we're working with NASA. So anyone working with NASA should be familiar with that document. Now it's just captured in the PSR form instead, which is great. We do want to call out that we know that there are some issues, particularly whenever people work with max in the PSR form. We're not quite sure what's happening, but one of our recommendations is before sending it to the proposal analyst is to print the PSR form to PDF. And that usually allows us to see all of the information as the PI selected it. So please bear with us as we're working through some of those kinks, but sometimes we just don't see some of the selections and we're working on it and trying to figure that out. So that's related to the PSR form. And then another form update, other than our standard, I'm sure you all are, have known that our cost estimation tool template is updated, and same with budget justification templates and stuff like that. But another thing I really wanted to call out is we did make some changes to our cost share addendum, which is embedded within the cost estimation tool itself. So I can guarantee, again, the people on this call will probably know more about this than I do, but just for a little bit of background and why we updated it is fringe benefit rates are no longer being pooled at the university for general funds and cost share funds. So now departments are getting a fringe benefit allotment each year. So therefore, when we're cost sharing fringe, we need to assign a specific speed type. So we just needed a better way of calling fringe benefits out on the cost share addendum so departments are truly aware of what the real costs are. So that's basically the reason for the big change in the cost share addendum. The look and feel of it should be the same. And again, instructions are still included on the right-hand side, but let your proposal analyst know if you have any questions, but we did update that for those reasons.
Good to know. Wow, we are like right on time. So thanks, Allie, for sharing all that. For those of you guys who were like, holy cow, that's a lot of information, we will be following up this fun little meeting here with an email just of our notes from the meeting, what Allie shared, what I asked, and we will also have this available as a recording to watch later. So now we are going to open up to questions from you guys. So here's how we're going to do this. I have already a good handful of questions in the chat. If you have questions that come up, go ahead and add them to the chat, and we're going to get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes. So thank you guys. So we're going to start with the first question that we had. What is CU's suggested F&A rates?
All right, awesome. I want to be careful with the word suggested. It's not suggested. Our negotiated F&A rate is currently 54%. That still is what is listed in that rate agreement, and that is the rate we will be using. Off campus is 26%. So that is what we should be using on all of our budgets until OCG tells you otherwise.
Great. So next question, where is OCG pulling its salary info from? The job list report?
I'm not familiar what the job list report is, so I don't know how to answer that. But OCG, we're going to have different access, I know, than some department administrators have. We pull our budget or our salary information from HCM, so the Human Capital Management System here at CU. We have access to those. And again, I know departments don't have the same access that we do, but we have, that's the most real-time data that we are able to pull from.
Awesome, thanks. Next question, do we have an update on the subcontract China assurance on the PSR, or do we continue to collect that separately?
April, that is a good question. I know Jess is on this call who did our PSR form, so I might ask her to take that for me.
Yeah, hi Allie, hi April. I'll just jump in and clarify on the China assurance. If we have a subcontract participating on the project, with the subcontract documents we request from that sub, they will need to provide a separate China assurance. So we'll collect it still from the PI internally, which is certifying, no China involvement on the CU Boulder side, but the subrecipients also need to provide that same assurance from their institution.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess.
Great. Thanks, Jess. Next question we have here. What about Sci and CV? What's the status on that?
Yeah, so Science CV, I guess I'm not quite sure I understand that question, but that's still in line with the NSF approved formats for biographical sketches and current and pending. So Science CV is the NSF biographical sketch. So that the status on that is that requirement was pushed back to, right now the date is October 5th for when that's required. So we'll wait and see if that's pushed back anymore. But again, our recommendation is to be doing that now.
Great. So just a follow up from Marissa. She said that her proposal analyst quoted a different salary for a PI to me than I was seeing in HCM in the job list report, which is why she asked. She was seeing the 5% cut and Marissa was not.
Okay. So that is, again, we do have people in OCG working on figuring out what we're all seeing. I can totally relate to this because I had a PI I looked up. I could see the temporary reduced rate and then nothing else, which again is the rate we do not want to be using. So we do need to be using that 100% rate. I think it has something to do with the fact that departments are just catching up with entry of all of their personnel. So I'm hoping in the next few weeks that like just sifts itself out and eventually we will see 2 entries at a minimum for everyone. One that includes their regular rate and then one that includes the reduced rate. It's really obvious when it is the reduced rate, like top right of the box in HCM, when you're looking at it, it will say temporary reduced rate. So just double check that. But Marissa, we should not be using that 5%. We should be using the full rate.
Great, thanks for clarifying on that. Any other questions? It looks like, Oh, this one might be for me. Are you aware that not all CU affiliated institutes can use Zoom? Will OCG be providing any other platform to include those that can't use Zoom? Are NOAA scientists, for example, or should we just suggest that they watch the YouTube video? This did come up a while back. Was that for your in-depth, Allie? Do you remember that?
I don't think it was mine. I don't remember this.
Right. I believe what we decided is that we were going to record our trainings because, yeah, I think we can't host this large of a meeting on Teams, and therefore the easiest, most safe way for them to access would be the recorded version. All right.
I see.
Okay.
Yes.
We have 5 more minutes. My PI's program manager told PI that a purchasing requisition for DOE renewal funding has been sent to Chicago head office for approval. We have been desperately waiting for the funding to be awarded. Do you know, by your experience in general, what is the time frame that DOE head office approves the funding?
So yeah, unfortunately, my experience is that, so no, we can't really anticipate what our sponsors are going to do pretty much ever. Especially, I think it is a good thing to note as well with COVID. We are seeing some delays in general from sponsors and awards. I mean, keeping in mind that their budgets are getting cut too, and there's just a lot that's happening. So unfortunately, we're just at the mercy of DOE issuing the award when they're ready to issue the award, but we don't really have any other guidance than that.
Great, thanks, Allie.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions out there before we wrap this up? We have about 5 more minutes of our scheduled time, so we do have time for 1 or 2 more questions if any come through the chat here. Otherwise, I can comment on, if I could be a room raider right now, you have an amazing assortment of plants and pictures in your background.
I've learned to adjust the beauty behind my face because I just be in my basement and it was kind of dark and random outlets, and apparently that's not very cheerful for people to look at. So
guys. You have great lighting, I must say, it's great. All right, well, it looks like no questions have popped up in the time that I've successfully or awkwardly tried to stall. Oh, wait, Anselmo. All right, when is the PSR guide going to be
I'm
ready?
assuming you mean the PSR user guide, Anselmo. And I believe our team is working on that. I don't know if we have a definitive date. I'm speaking slowly. If anyone from my team wants to jump in, Jessica.
Yes, Christy and I are currently working on that. We should have that finalized within, the next week or two. We apologize for the delays. We just had a slew of proposal submissions with careers that really have pushed the priority towards submissions. And the current user guide is still pretty much still relevant. It's just the organization of the content just needs to be updated.
Thank you, Jess. And that actually just kind of reminded me of something else to call out, just so you're all aware, is our proposal team has been surprisingly incredibly busy during this time. We have had a ton of deadlines. It's personally the busiest I've ever been, which is, I guess, surprising, but also not, because we're all at home and it's a great time for PIs to be writing their proposals. But yeah, deadlines have increased pretty dramatically across the board. So that's just something else that we've seen that has changed during COVID a little bit. So we'll see what our final numbers look like.
Thank you so much, Allie, for being here, and Jessica Rowell, who's our proposal manager. Thank you for also chiming in. We appreciate you guys showing up for this session. So again, we will follow up with a nice little notes email, as well as letting you know where this recording lives on our website. So Allie, again, thank you. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Yes, thank you, Nikki. Take care, everyone.